My name is April and I'm a recovering camera addict. I thought I had my addiction under control after purchasing the Sony A7V with its 33 megapixels. Then when I unsuspectingly opened YouTube to relax with some videos, this happened.
The brand new Sony A7R Mark VI
of the Sony A7RVI.
Sony A7R6.
A7R Mark VI.
The A7R6.
Sony A7R6.
A7R6, huh? Yeah. Fantastic.
Embargo day is a camera addict's worst nightmare. My gut told me to get off of YouTube or else I'd end up with a major gas attack. That's how I ended up purchasing the Sony A7V. But I thought to myself, it won't hurt just to watch one review. And besides, I've been really happy with my Sony A7V with its 33 megapixels, so I decided to watch just one review. I picked Jared Polin. Before watching his video, I thought 33 megapixels was a perfect amount for me.
Do you need 67 megapixels? Are you king cropper? Is that your thing? I'm not a cropper, and I think that that's kind of, if your idea of buying this camera is, well, I just want to crop to my heart's content, you can do it. I would then tell you to try and get better with your composition and your photography personally.
Since I prefer cropping in Lightroom to getting my composition right in the camera, having almost 67 megapixels seemed like the answer to all of my issues. But then I realized how much I could crop in on my squirrel photos, and suddenly having 66.8 megapixels became my newest obsession.
66 megapixels.
66.8 megapixel BSI sensor.
You know, this new 66 megapixel sensor.
67 megapixels.
67 megapixels?
Nobody needs 67 megapixels. That's ridiculous.
That is 67 megapixels, which is going to be insane.
I tried to take some comfort in the fact that my Sony A7V can do a burst mode of up to 30 frames per second. There's no way that the Sony A7R6 could do that with its high-resolution sensor. But then I discovered how wrong I was when I watched Jason Vong.
Jason Vong is never wrong.
What?
Damn, look at that. 30 frames per second. Almost like a mini movie.
Jason Vong is never wrong.
And with 66 megapixels, still plenty room to crop. But yeah, 30 frames per second, no blackout frames, but obviously it has to use electronic shutter, which I know some of you are going to be super concerned about.
But at least the Sony A7R6 wouldn't have any autofocusing advantages over my Sony A7V. I mean, I have a Bionz XR2 partially stacked sensor.
The autofocus tracking is insane. They're literally flying to the edge of my screen right now, and the A7R Mark VI is following them to the edge of it. In my experience with both the flagship A1 Mark II and the people's favorite A7 Mark V, I feel like those two cameras aren't as good when it comes to tracking really small subjects. They would lose focus quite often, especially when the birds leave the center portion of the frame. But the A7R Mark VI with the same 759 autofocus points, I am also getting this magpie catching its prey at the edge of my frame. Delicious.
In order to calm down my gas, I told myself that at least my Sony A7V is a much more capable video camera. When filming in 4K 24 frames per second, I have a readout speed of 14.5 milliseconds. But then when I decided to watch Mark Bennett's review because he had Gerald Undone as a guest star, I guess he's unretired, and then to my astonishment I found out that the Sony A7R6 has a much faster readout speed than the Sony A7V.
In the 4K modes, you actually have two options. If you shoot up to 30 frames per second, you can enable dual gain. Now, you might have already mentioned this in your video, I don't know. But when dual gain is off, it obviously reads much faster. When dual gain is on, I think it essentially reads the frame twice. So when it's off in 4K, the read speed jumps all the way up to 7.3 milliseconds, which is like, I don't know, A7S3, FX3 levels, right? Very, very fast. The way that it does this is I believe it's doing like a binning algorithm for the fact that you can create a 4K image with a sensor this high resolution by doing like combining 4 pixels into one. So like a 2 by 1 pixel binning thing. It's probably some sort of algorithm like that. It's very clean. I looked at it on a bunch of different charts. It produces a very sharp image because the result is after you bin it down, you still have like was it 5K, I think?
Yeah.
I wasn't exactly sure how pixel binning worked, but I was starting to convince myself that I needed a 7.3 millisecond readout speed. My Sony A7V may not have the fastest readout speed, but at least it can do 4K at 120 frames per second, albeit with an APS-C crop. There's no way that the Sony A7R6 could do that.
Another feature I was thrilled to see on this is the aforementioned 4K 120 recording, which was not available on the A7R5. And here I was impressed to see that the detail is very similar to what we're seeing in the standard 4K record mode. So not a big loss in sharpness. There is unfortunately a bit of a crop when you're using this mode, but honestly, I'm just happy to see it.
You mean the 4K 120 doesn't have an APS-C crop? One feature that the Sony A7R6 can do that my Sony A7V absolutely can't is filming in 8K. But after watching Mark Bennett's review, I realized that it can only film in 30 frames per second. And you can't even use dynamic stabilization.
In this camera is the dynamic active stabilization, which I think makes such a huge difference in the Sony cameras. It is very gimbal-like footage without a gimbal. And even though you can't do dynamic active stabilization in 8K in this camera, you can do active stabilization in 8K. So let me show you that now.
Even though the footage looks gorgeous, I definitely need dynamic stabilization with as much coffee as I drink. 8K would be a practical resolution for cropping in on my squirrel footage, but I definitely need 120 frames per second, minimum. Despite the limitations of 8K for filming wildlife, I have to admit it's been a secret goal of mine to have vlogs as beautiful as Mark Bennett's, and having 67 megapixels could be the key to unlocking my career as a squirrel photographer. Just as I was about to list my Sony A7V for sale on eBay in order to get the Sony A7R6, I came across a video from Camera Conspiracies. Since I've always valued his opinions most in making my camera buying decisions, I decided I would watch his video first before dusting off the Paybu credit card with B&H.
But let me just explain to you what Sony reached for. 67 megapixels, so you're high, you're super sharp. For video, it's a 10K sensor. Okay, wow. But we don't do that. We do 8K with the crop, only 30 frames per second. Literally, what's the point? Like Canon 8K 60 RAW, the file sizes were ridiculous, but it had use cases and it looked glorious because it had some slow-mo. Who's gonna use 8K 30 for what? For what goddamn thing? Not on my forsaken earth.
After watching his video, I decided to put a pause on buying the Sony A7R6 in hopes that the Sony A7S4 would come out shortly. I had somehow survived Embargo Day without going deeper into debt. I felt a bit stronger in my abilities to resist buying the newest camera. But then I realized Panasonic released a new Micro Four Thirds camera.
This is the brand new Panasonic L10.
So by now, you've most likely heard about the new Lumix L10. It is a Micro Four Thirds sensor in a compact camera.
And the Embargo lifts in about 7 hours, so let's just get stuck in. This is the new Lumix L10, and it looks very much like an LX100.
I don't think my addiction to buying new cameras will ever completely go away. I'm just trying to manage it the best I can. If you like this video, give it a like, consider subscribing for more camera-related content from a newbie like me. God bless.